Welcome everyone to this channel where I will be sharing episode reviews of that 1960s television show that I enjoy so much, Lost in Space. I encourage you to like and subscribe so that you don't miss each new installment as I work my way through all 83 episodes of this wonderful series. Up next, Season 1, Episode 11, Wish Upon a Star. Smith, having been the cause of a few recent calamities, is banished from the Jupiter 2 camp. Concerned, Will comes out to find him the following morning and discovers that he has selected a poor campsite. They pack up and head off to search for a better site when they come upon the wreck of an old spaceship. As Smith begins to settle in there, Will finds an odd alien device. After a bit of tinkering, they discover that it will grant the wearer whatever they wish for, and the ever-greedy Smith instantly begins imagining what this alien device can do for him. After using this machine to indulge himself with luxuries for a time, Will persuades Smith to bring it to the Jupiter and share it with the family. Once he does, it sows the seeds of indolence and discontent, after which John sends Smith and the machine packing. Settling back into the wreckage of the old spaceship, Smith wishes for a servant. That proves to be a step too far, and the owner of the device emerges to recover what has come to be called the wishing machine. Unquestionably, this is one of my all-time favorite episodes. Wish Upon a Star has it all. First, we have the story. Now, there is nothing new or groundbreaking about the story, but it plays wonderfully. Like The Sky is Falling before it, Wish Upon a Star comes with a moral that adds an additional layer to an already great episode. So with that, let's get on to our story. I love this opening scene. Don and Will working on the chariot while Smith lounges and boasts. Don comes looking for some help and, as usual, needs to resort to threats to get any cooperation out of Smith. Don asks him to get a fuel pack and place it near the back of the chariot. Importantly, Don tells him to handle it carefully as the fuel can explode upon contact with air. Characteristically, Smith complains that it's too heavy for him and how this kind of labor is beneath him. With some disgust, he tosses it to the ground and the fuel does begin to leak. Will and Don come to sense the leak. Don jumps up, grabs the fuel pack, and tosses it into the air just as it explodes. Like the opening scene of The Sky is Falling before it, I do love this opening scene for all the same reasons. As much as everything was a bit predictable, it's fun hearing Smith blather on about himself, Don coming to, well, let's call it persuade Smith to contribute some help, and then Smith offering his condescending responses. With the explosion of the fuel pack, we have for Smith, strike one. Smith and Don trade insults as John comes over to bring an end to the arguing. John asks for an explanation, but neither Don nor Smith will address his question, leaving it to Will to explain. Smith continues his efforts to escape responsibility for the whole incident, and John appears to be willing to accept his explanation. That is, until John asks Smith about his assigned work in the hydroponic garden. Smith claims that he was distracted and apologizes for the delay, but assures John he will get right to it. Here, John reveals that he already knew that they no longer had a farm as it had died of neglect. Smith apologizes, but as John quickly points out, his apologies do not make up for lost food. For Smith, strike two. Don, who had stepped away for a moment, returns, stating that Smith is always at the bottom of all of their troubles, and the sooner they get rid of him, the better. Smith asks John if those are his sentiments as well. John's silence expresses his opinion fully. With that, Smith announces that he shall leave and steps away to pack. Interestingly, Will takes a step to go after Smith, but John stops him, saying to let Smith go. Later, the family is sitting down to a meal. Clearly, Will is upset about Smith being sent away, though Maureen is quick to point out that no one is making him go. Penny just as quickly points out that no one is asking him to stay either. Will makes his case that Smith is simply not capable of providing for himself on his own, but John is resolute. He's a grown man and will learn very quickly when he doesn't have the family to lean on. At that moment, Smith emerges from the Jupiter with some necessities, including a laser rifle for protection. Maureen packed him some food, but he refuses, saying that what he is doing, he must do without further aid. With some final best wishes from Will, Smith marches off. Indeed, Will alone gets up to wave goodbye, his sadness over Smith's departure clearly written across his face. Later that evening, John checks in on the children and discovers that Will is still awake, worried about Dr. Smith. John offers some assurances, and Will gets back into bed. But then we cut to Smith as he stands watch in the night. He's huddled by a fire with the rifle at hand. Every sound coming out of the wilderness assures him that he will not sleep a wink. Out of fear, he grabs a laser and fires into a nearby tree, out of which flies what I can only describe as a flying manta ray, and a pretty cool-looking one at that. The next morning, we see a pair of boots walking towards Smith. It's Will. Somewhat characteristically, Smith assures Will that he slept like a baby, and though unnecessary, he will be all too happy to take advantage of the bit of food Will has brought along. Will says that Smith's campsite is not very desirable, and he immediately begins to pack Smith up so that they can go off and find a better site. After a short hike, they come upon the wreckage of an ancient alien spaceship, and Will suggests that that may make the perfect campsite. Once inside the skeleton of this wreckage, Will wonders about the door that appears to lead to the ship's cockpit. He tries to open the door, but it will not budge. Smith talks about getting his new home in order. Will says that he needs to get back to the Jupiter, but Smith persuades him to stay just a little longer. Smith even says he'll do all the work. Ultimately, he just wants Will's company. While helping to open Smith's bedroll, Will catches a glimpse of some alien device. He takes the cap of this device out of its cradle and places it on his head, looking for a bit of a laugh out of Smith. Smith is feeling hungry, and while still wearing the cap, Will says he wouldn't mind having something to eat himself. The alien cap and cradle begin to glow, and suddenly a large serving of alien food magically appears. Smith and Will both wonder if it was the device that made this food appear, and they want to test it. Smith starts to put on the cap and try again, but he rather amusingly pauses and places it back on Will's head instead, asking him to wish for something. Will decides on apples, and sure enough, apples begin to rain down upon the both of them. I have to wonder whether these were real apples or plastic ones. They certainly appeared to have some weight to them and may have been real, but I have to imagine it must have hurt at least a little bit to have dozens of apples pour down on them. Nonetheless, Will picks up an apple and takes a bite as Smith begins to imagine the possibilities. Smith swears Will to secrecy, claiming that he will want to take some time to test the machine and ensure there is no danger. The next morning, we see that John has found an apple in Will's room. As apples do not grow on the planet, John says,
"Where did he get it?"
I don't know, but I intend to find out.
Will is the last to arrive at the breakfast table and then says he's not particularly hungry. I always smile a bit at Penny's reaction. Again, more of that believable sibling rivalry, a little bit of poking, but also the way in which John introduces the topic to Will and everyone else of the apples. John asks for an explanation, but Will is reluctant to give it owing to his promise to Smith. Don tries to make the case that if Will did not give his word, and especially since it's Smith, he's not really breaking in confidence, at which time Will starts to explain the whole story. Meanwhile, back at the wreckage, we have Smith indulging himself in every luxury and excess. Will arrives back at the derelict ship, and Smith shows off what he describes as some of the necessities of life. Will tells him that he had to tell his father about the machine, and Smith says no harm done. He offers Will a piece of French pastry, but the always honorable Will passes, saying that it wouldn't be fair if he had some and not the rest of the family. At this, Smith presents him with the entire tray, sending it on to the family with his compliments. Interestingly, Smith goes on to say that he's missed Will, and that it has been lonely there without him. Will says he could have come to the Jupiter, but Smith reminds him that he's been banished. Now we have Will challenging Smith.
I've been banished, remember?
Is that the only reason you stayed away?
I don't quite follow you, my boy.
You said all you wanted to do was check out the machine.
That's exactly what I've been doing.
For 4 days?
Well, you see, science is a matter of trial and error. I had to be sure there was no danger.
Have you found any?
There are certain problems. But as soon as they're ironed out...
When will that be?
Eventually, my boy, eventually.
What you really mean is never, don't you, sir?
Now, Will, what a thing to say. I fully intend to bring the machine to the family.
Don said now that you had the machine, you didn't need us anymore.
Surely you don't believe that?
He said all you cared about was yourself.
That's not true.
Then why are you keeping the machine? I don't think I want the paster anymore. I sort of lost my appetite for it. And I'm sure the rest of the family would feel the same way. Goodbye, sir.
Will? Wait a moment.
Smith is clearly distressed by this, not just over Will's departure, but over Will's sinking opinion of him. We cut back to the Jupiter 2, where Penny is reading a book. As someone who, as a young boy, read a large number of Hardy Boys books, it was fun to see Penny reading a Nancy Drew story. Will is resting in a chair, looking off into the distance. Don comes up and asks him if he's still thinking about Dr. Smith. And then Will, well, I'll let him speak for himself.
I know he was always doing things that were wrong, but underneath, I like him, that's all.
Smith, walking into the Jupiter 2 right at that moment, is greatly pleased to hear that comment, as it affirms that he does still have Will's affections and esteem. Smith offers an amusing statement or two, takes a moment to shore up Will's opinion of him, and then announces a truly spectacular plan.
Suspicion. However, I'm about to do something for you that will dispel all your petty doubts.
And what would that be?
With the aid of this incredible machine, I'm going to create another complete Jupiter 2, which will carry us safely through the heavens and back to Earth.
Gee.
Outside the ship, Smith takes a moment to boast about what he characterizes as his superior intellect, dons the wishing machine cap, and begins to parade around the large open area wishing for a complete Jupiter 2. After a moment, with his eyes still closed, he begins to congratulate himself on the accomplishment when Will tells him that there's nothing there. Then, with a puff of smoke and a bit of sound, a small Jupiter 2 appears on a rock. Will and Penny run up to it as if they have just been given a new toy to play with. The Jupiter 2 miniature that we see here is in actuality one of the filming models used when creating special effects of the ship while in flight out in space. Later, down in the lab, the robot performs an analysis on the device. He offers some insights, but is not able to determine how the machine actually transforms thoughts into material items. Penny thinks of it in terms of an Aladdin's lamp. That sibling rivalry emerges once more and quite believably exhibited as Will dispels her opinion as a fairy tale, when what they really want is some scientific insight. Smith takes the simpler approach, as he says,
Nonsense and Jabberwocky. We have the gift horse. Let us not examine its mouth too closely.
Then Maureen walks into the lab and asks if she can use the machine to order up something special for dinner. Smith identifies one limitation of the machine, that it can only work twice per day. Once again, let me leave it to Dr. Smith to offer his own perspectives on this, as well as John's quite rational response.
Aren't 2 miracles a day sufficient? Go ahead, my dear. Order your dinner. Unless, of course, Professor Robinson would like to have the first wish.
No, you go on ahead. I'm afraid I'm a practical man, and somehow I don't believe that you can get something for nothing.
As we cut to the next scene, it's clear that everyone has been putting the wishing machine through its paces. Judy comes out and models a new gown that entices Don to step away from his work on the chariot so as to have a stroll with her. In another quite believable, if even recognizable scene of sibling rivalry, Will and Penny are arguing over who will get the last wish of the day from the machine. Will wants some scientific equipment, Penny would love to have some tapes of classical music, and they are once again ridiculing each other's desires as they subject the machine to a tug of war. Penny finally convinces Will to go get John so that he can settle the matter. Will warns her not to do anything with the machine until he gets back, but Penny's expression clearly reveals her intent as she dons the cap and makes her wish. Quite upset, Will makes the case to John that Penny should be punished for this outrage. When Penny comes to John, she is quick to delight in her new tapes. John then launches into a wonderful talk that turns the event into a real learning moment.
Wonderful. Bach and Mozart and Beethoven.
Well, I won't argue with your choice, but do you have anything there by Deceit?
Deceit? I don't think I've ever heard of that composer.
Oh, perhaps you don't recognize the name. Maybe these names will help. Cheat, lie, trick. Do you recognize the composer, or do I have to go on?
No, sir.
It takes Penny a moment to catch on, but once she does, the message is clearly received and she feels quite ashamed. John asks Don to account for the work that he has not yet completed on the chariot. Indeed, he addresses each person at the table one at a time regarding the work they were supposed to do but failed to accomplish. Clear in his own mind that the thought machine has been the cause of all of these problems and strife, John takes it from the table and brings it into the Jupiter. There, Smith is already announcing to the robot that he is now obsolete. John walks over to Smith, hands him the thought machine, and insists that he get rid of it. Smith refuses, but as John will not have the machine in camp, Smith's only alternative is to return to the derelict spaceship. He asks to take the robot as a companion, but of course, John refuses. As such, Smith leaves for the derelict in the morning with the wishing machine in hand. There, we can see Smith has been furnishing his new home with luxuries. In classic Smith form, even though he is living in a wreckage, not much more than the skeleton of an old spaceship, apparently without even any sort of roof, he is now dining at a banquet table filled with fine silver, and even turns to salute the Mona Lisa, which is now hanging behind him. Having overindulged himself, he pushes away from the table, plops onto a settee, looks at the coffee off on a table from a distance, and wishes to have a cup. He declares, however, he is simply too tired. But if only he had a servant. Smith reaches for the wishing machine, dons the cap, and starts to wish for a servant to bring him some coffee. As is so often the case with Smith, he's about to get much more than he asked for. The door that Will was unable to budge now swings open, and a strange being emerges. Smith repeats that he would like a coffee, but the creature makes it immediately clear he is not there to be Smith's servant. The creature reaches out with both hands and lets out a moan. Smith correctly assumes that the creature wants the machine, but Smith has no interest in giving it up. He grabs the machine and hightails it out of the derelict ship. Meanwhile, back at the Jupiter, everything created by the thought machine begins to come apart. Fruit goes bad. Judy's gown is now in tatters, and she says Penny's tapes won't play either. Outside, Smith continues to flee from the creature. He's heading towards the Jupiter, but along the way finds a place to hide the thought machine. The creature does not see the machine tucked down behind the rocks and continues his pursuit of Smith in a slow, plodding, and irresistible way. Inside the Jupiter, John, Don, Maureen, and Will are on the upper deck, pondering why everything went bad all at once. At that moment, Smith can be seen through the viewport, frantically waving his hands and yelling for help. He runs into the ship, turns on the force field, and ducks down behind the front control panels. Of course, no one understands what this is all about, that is, until the creature appears. He seems to sense that Smith is inside and makes an abrupt turn towards the ship as Smith ducks down behind the controls. As the creature reaches out with both hands, he comes in contact with a force field and gets a shock. The creature backs away a bit and once more reaches out, clearly asking for something. Smith finally acknowledges that he asked for a servant. This creature appeared and now wants the thought machine. Smith says the machine is hidden in a safe place, but John is clear. He wants Smith to return it to the creature. Of course, Smith refuses, at which time John correctly says that that creature has no business with any of them and threatens to turn off the force field. Smith finally agrees to give up the machine, but doesn't want to go out while the creature is still out there. At that moment, Will has another look, and now the creature is gone. John and Don grab some lights, a couple of laser rifles, and head out, along with Smith and Will. As they step away, through the viewport, Maureen sees that the creature had been hidden behind some rocks and has now emerged. Instead of following the men, though, he simply disappears. Along the way, Smith's fears get the better of him, and he pleads to turn back, but John won't have it. Smith leads them to where the thought machine is hidden. He points it out, and John asks Will to grab it. Will hands it to Smith, and they all begin their trek towards the derelict spaceship. As they approach the wreckage, the device begins to glow, and the alien creature suddenly reappears, once more with outstretched hand. Don raises his laser, but John calls for caution.
He wants the machine.
John passes the machine back to Smith and demands that he give it to the creature. Smith refuses, fearful that the creature will kill him. Out of patience, John forces the machine back into Smith's hands and essentially pushes him forward. Cautiously, timidly, Smith approaches the creature and finally places the wishing machine in his hands. Then the creature slowly turns and disappears behind a door from which he came. Then suddenly, everything in the derelict ship that Smith had wished for disappears. Predictably, he denounces the creature as vindictive. Will wonders if the creature is still behind the door. Somewhat inexplicably, Will runs to open it, but the door just falls off, revealing absolutely nothing on the other side. Will then asks why were they given all those things only to have them taken away, and as usual, John has the answer.
Because Dr. Smith asked for too much. You know, he could have had anything he wanted. But like most people, it wasn't enough. He wanted more. When he tried to create a slave, the alien realized this.
After some acknowledgement by Will, there is one final gesture of goodwill from the creature.
He would have stayed, Doctor. We made him leave because we were selfish. He must have really heard me.
Our next scene sets up our next episode, The Raft. As always, I will withhold my comments until my review of that episode. So with that, a few more thoughts on Wish Upon a Star. First, in case it's not already obvious, I love this one for so many very good reasons. For one thing, even though this can sort of feel like a Smith and Will episode, and it sort of is, it's actually very much an ensemble episode involving the entire cast in a meaningful way. I think both the relic ship as well as the alien creature are very cool. The spaceship, being nothing more than a skeleton, is very convincing as a wreckage from very long ago. Irwin Allen is somewhat notorious for using and reusing props, and we will see many things repurposed throughout the series. There is one very interesting example of that here that I think very few fans of the show ever notice. When you look at the alien wreckage, off to the left, there is some spiky kind of thing pointing up. It has been said by some with knowledge of such things that what this is actually the cradle portion of the spaceship that we see in the episode Invaders from the Fifth Dimension. Getting back to the alien, he's one of my favorite kind of alien creatures. Much like the one in the Season 2 opener, Blast Off into Space, this is a creature that is nearly featureless. It doesn't chase as much as it slowly and steadily plods along after that which it seeks in an irresistible Frankenstein kind of way. To this young boy in the 60s, this creature was one of the scariest aliens the Robinsons ever faced. Watching Smith timidly walking towards him, placing the device in the creature's outstretched hands, the muted moaning, the camera work essentially putting you in the center of the action, it was all done very effectively. One of the things I like about these early episodes is the sibling rivalry between Will and Penny. There are times later in the series when this is done and it doesn't come across in a very believable way. Here, as they not only fight over the wishing machine, but go so far as to ridicule each other's personal interests, I think it's an experience that any viewer can recognize and find relatable, and that helps to build on the all-important layer of family as it plays out across an already strong story. And then there's the star of this episode. No, it's not Smith, nor is it Will. It's John. He's the character that brings this story home. He has some of the best scenes and some of the best lines, and Guy does a masterful job of delivering them. Maybe my favorite is when he confronts Penny for having deceived Will. He then helps the entire family see how they have sold their integrity in exchange for some minor worldly possessions. The entire scene is very powerful and includes some of John's most poignant dialogue of the entire series, and Guy delivers it all very well. Here, let me call out the fantastic work by this episode's director, Sutton Raleigh. This episode features a lot of creative photography. There are unique angles, some very effective framing for various scenes, handheld camera work, and focal length selections that heighten the drama, and so much more, all giving this episode a cinematic quality. We see it right from the beginning as we have John's shadow falling upon Penny's cabin door, essentially pre-announcing to us, the audience, his arrival. There's a scene of the family crowded around Will's apple shot up from below. Not just a crane shot of the derelict spaceship, but the camera then sweeps down and into the derelict ship. Using a wide-angle lens as the creature reaches out, making his hands disproportionately large, essentially putting us right into the center of the action. Even simple little things, like following Smith's feet through the wilderness as he runs from the creature before showing Smith, and then replicating all of that for the creature chasing him. Or when John looks to Will for an explanation about the exploding fuel pack, we don't see Will straight on, as other directors might do. We're looking down at him from John's perspective, once more essentially placing us into the scene. The same thing happens at the end when Smith hands the machine to the creature. We are looking down on Smith from the creature's point of view. These things may not sound like much, but they really do change how we experience the episode. Directors on Lost in Space were frequently behind schedule and always under pressure to get film into the can on time. Setting up the shots I've described always takes quite a lot of time, but to me as the viewer, Sutton Raleigh's time was very well spent. Here, let me take a moment to revisit one of my ongoing themes, the development of the all-important Smith and Will relationship. I view this episode as the one that really marks the true start of that friendship between the two of them. During the earliest episodes, Smith showed some affinity for Will, but Will was quite skeptical and at times even hostile towards Smith. In The Oasis, 2 episodes ago, though we didn't actually witness a building of this friendship, Will does call Smith his friend. With Wish Upon a Star, things have materially changed. Though Will is still a little questioning of Smith and does recognize that he creates problems, we begin to see him behave much more warmly to Smith. He was clearly sad to see him leave camp. Without his parents knowing, he went out to find Smith and then helped him find a better campsite. And he even defended him to the family. For Smith's part, his relationship with Will becomes much warmer, if not even paternal, in this episode. More so, we see Smith view Will's friendship as something that he values very highly. He persuades Will to stay, while Smith offers to do all the work setting up camp just because he wants Will's companionship. When Smith returns to the Jupiter with the wishing machine, he did that because he didn't want to risk losing Will's esteem and friendship. That's what got him there. It's hard not to smile at very simple moments like when the two of them cheerfully march off in a search for a better campsite, calling out Hup 2, 3, 4, doing so as pals. Clearly, the foundation for this friendship and this all-important relationship for the series is laid here in Wish Upon a Star. For every episode, even great ones like this, there are at least a few things that I wish were done differently, or maybe a bit better. With Wish Upon a Star, the list is uncommonly short, comprised of just 3 items. One involves the creature, who, as I've already said, I think is so cool. But why, oh why, does this creature wear a turtleneck? His look, his sounds, his motions are all fantastically alien. He's one of the most believable and scariest of all alien creatures on Lost in Space, and yet, when you look at him, you can't help but ask yourself, where did he get that shirt? I mean, does he shop at Sears? He doesn't have pants, so why does he have a shirt? He would have looked so much more believable without any clothes, or maybe some rags or a toga type of thing instead. I can only assume that he wears a shirt because it hides the zipper or some other kind of closure for the costume on its back. But even if that's the reason, could they not have come up with some better solution to hide that closure? The funny thing is, I've seen this episode many dozens of times over 60 years, and it's really not until just a few years ago that I even ever noticed that he was wearing a shirt for the first time, so maybe it's not such a big deal after all. Then there's Judy. With very rare exception, she's portrayed as vapid, if not even being that silly blonde who is consumed only with herself and her appearance. In this episode, Will wants to wish for scientific equipment. Penny is delighted to receive tapes of our greatest classical composers, and Judy wishes for an evening gown while on an alien planet? Things get a bit worse when her gown is later reduced to tatters. It's a little difficult to watch this seemingly young adult cry over a dress. I know the Jupiter mission is a family thing, but with the way the Judy character is typically written, she ends up looking oddly out of place among this troupe. We are also left to wonder, by the way, if the machine tore up her dress, why did Judy's hair also get so messy? No disrespect to Marta, of course, this is simply the way her character has been written. Finally, there's the matter of the astrogator. Now where did that go? I don't doubt having this large bit of technology in the middle of the set, especially with reflections appearing in its domed glass, created all sorts of challenges for the film crew, and that removing it certainly simplified things greatly for the production. It's actually been gone for a while. I believe Mr. Nobody is the first episode where we see it gone. In this episode, that disappearance becomes a lot more obvious as Will and Maureen now sit and play cards where the astrogator used to be. I get it, but it's a shame as it is such a cool-looking piece of technology and it just doesn't make sense to have it simply go away. So with that, let me say that I grade Wish Upon a Star as an A+. I rank it 11th for the season, putting it well into the top half of all episodes among this very strong first season. I likewise rank it a very high 18th for the series, comfortably putting it in the top quartile of all 83 episodes. Wish Upon a Star is one of the episodes written around a moral theme. I can't say there is anything novel or groundbreaking about the story, or even the way it's told, and it is at times anything but subtle. That said, this episode is dramatic, it's very long in atmosphere, it involves the entire cast, and we even get some character development, all in addition to that morality message. With the moral of the story in mind, I think the lesson may be best summed up by John, so let me leave it to him to share the final word.
Well, does anyone care to make a comment? All right, then I will. And it can be summed up in 3 words. The thought machine.
Well, I guess maybe we've all been relying on it too much, John, but...
But why work when the machine can do it for you?
Will, up to now, this family's been getting along very well. We have respect and love for one another. And you cannot wish for those things with that. And then we get this machine that makes dreams come true. And instead of making us happier, it sows the seeds of discontent, mistrust, and indolence. I said a machine that makes dreams come true. Nightmares can also be dreams.
If you would like to see the full series, at the time of this recording, it presently airs for free on MeTV. That said, you can still find the series on DVD. Better still, pick up Lost in Space on Blu-ray. On that set, the image quality has been sharpened, and there is some excellent bonus material, including commentary by some of the cast. Like I said, I'm a fan, and for me at least, the Blu-ray is a must-have. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on Wish Upon a Star. One of the things I enjoy most about sharing reviews like this is how different fans perceive each episode quite differently, and I invite you to leave your own perspectives below in the comments. Most of all, I hope you will come back and join me when I review our next episode, The Raft, another excellent Season 1 episode. Once again, I recommend subscribing so that you don't miss each new installment. Thanks for watching.